It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful from here, Neil. It has a stark beauty all its own.
Have you really thought about what it would take to fake a moon landing? Because the rocket did launch. We all saw the rocket launch, okay? So there's hardware there. They're like office buildings of blueprints for the design of the Saturn V rocket. The hundreds of engineering hours that went behind this and the records of those designs. If you wanted to fake the moon landing, you would have to fake all of these documents. And it just seems to me, it's way easier to just go to the moon. Has anyone considered that?
First is that it's not unusual at all for there to be missing elements in an archive of original material. In the work we do on older films, the studios, the television broadcasters, the owners of the content routinely scour the earth to find the best surviving elements. And sometimes it's the original negative a film was shot with, sometimes it's a print that was distributed, sometimes it's some eclectic copy that someone has kept, and we are very often in the business of having to put together that patchwork, if you will, of material and make it into a seamless, finished piece of material.
NASA's Apollo 11 moon landing, with Neil Armstrong's first step and Buzz Aldrin close behind, is one of those moments that lives in everyone's head, even if the memory is just a ghostly black and white TV image. That's why the line, "NASA erased the moon landing footage," instantly sounds like a cover-up. But NASA's explanation is more boring and more painful. It was tape management. Alongside the live broadcast feed, engineers also recorded a higher quality, raw, slow scan signal onto telemetry data tapes as a backup. Decades later, a 3-year hunt concluded those reels were probably erased and reused during an early 1980s magnetic tape shortage, even as NASA tried to make up for it with a major restoration project. In this video, we're digging into what was lost, what survives, and why NASA says the original footage was erased. 2 signals, 1 historic broadcast.
Hey, that's great. Is the lighting halfway decent?
Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface.
Apollo 11's Moonwalk camera did not transmit in a normal television standard. It sent a monochrome, slow-scan television signal at 10 frames per second, with 320 lines of resolution. That format was chosen because bandwidth was limited, and the video had to share space with voice and other telemetry coming back from the lunar module. On Earth, stations at places like Goldstone in California and Honeysuckle Creek and Parkes in Australia received the raw slow-scan signal. The signal was split into 2 branches. One branch was recorded unprocessed onto telemetry data tapes for backup. The other branch was fed into a scan converter so it could be turned into NTSC and sent to television networks. The scan conversion was an optical workaround. A high-quality monitor displayed the slow scan image, and an NTSC television camera re-photographed that screen. The system then used timing tricks to build interlaced frames that standard TVs could show. It worked, but it lowered contrast and resolution, and any setting mistakes could make the first minutes look especially rough. After conversion, the signal traveled through long analog links to Houston and then to broadcasters, and each link could add noise. So the iconic footage is real, but it's several generations away from what the lunar camera actually produced at the receiving station monitors. What the missing tapes held.
What was lost was the very original source backup data recordings of the TV transmission from the moon to the Earth.
But this tape, which is a telemetry tape, had 1 track on it. That was for video, slow scan. They had 14 tracks of data, such as voice, telemetry, biomedical data. This was all treated as telemetry. Why did we record video there? For backup. In case live didn't go, we had something to play back from the original source.
The missing tapes were not the broadcast tapes sitting in TV archives. They were 1-inch telemetry reels that captured the raw, slow scan signal and other data as a safety net. At the time, that backup mattered mostly as insurance in case the real-time conversion or the global broadcast pipeline failed. Engineers like Stan LeBar remembered the original pictures looking better. He also knew the raw footage had been preserved in that odd format on tapes, which meant that later technology might be able to do a cleaner conversion than 1969 optics could manage. The whole dream was to give future viewers something closer to the source. That quality gap is easy to misunderstand today because the public only saw the NTSC conversion. Millions watched live and countless copies were recorded on videotape and kinescope film, so it felt like the event was already saved. In the years after Apollo 11, protecting the backup reels was not treated as urgent. The result is that two truths can exist at once. The Moonwalk video was never erased from history because many broadcast-era copies survived. But the version that could have delivered the sharpest and most detailed reconstruction, the raw, slow-scan backup, is the one that disappeared. A 3-year hunt.
In 2006, Goddard entered into a formal search. I formed a team with Mr. LeBar, Mr. John Sarkisian of Australia, Mr. Colin McKellar, and Mr. Bill Wood of Mojave, of the Goldstone tracking site. Bill Wood, myself, and Stan participate in the program. So we had knowledge of how the program worked, what the operational procedures were, and what to expect and where to go. The records were scanned. The records at Goddard went back 40 years. Some records were handmade. There weren't computers in those days to put on data files everything that occurred.
The missing reels became a bigger story in the 2000s, and a public report helped trigger a massive NASA search. The team followed hundreds of leads and checked anything that might be labeled Apollo, tape, telemetry, or simply data. They dug through memos, shipping records, and handwritten notes that had been sitting for decades. A major stop was the Washington National Records Center, a huge government storage site with endless racks of boxes. Searchers compared it to the final warehouse scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark because it was that kind of scale. They returned again and again, opening containers and tracing inventory trails that were not always clear. The hunt also went beyond government buildings. Leads sent people to storage businesses and to private locations where old material had drifted over time. Teams checked archives in Australia because Australian stations played a critical role in receiving the signal, and they reviewed what was held in major broadcast collections. The tone from the search leaders was not smug or defensive. NASA's Dick Navsger said, quote, "We're all saddened that they're not there. We all wish we had 20/20 hindsight," which captures the feeling that this was a loss, not a victory lap. The early 1980s tape crisis.
In 1981-82, we pulled another 30,000. We then had Landsat in dire need of tapes in the network, and we had the start of the shuttle program. Those tapes were pulled in, and records show that they were pulled out, and they were never returned. The records clearly showed that there's an inescapable conclusion that this team has reached, and that is that these 45 tapes were included in the several 100,000 that were pulled out, recertified, degaussed, and put back into the network.
As the investigation continued, the team found a troubling pattern. Large numbers of magnetic tape boxes had been withdrawn from storage over the years, with tens of thousands removed in the early 1980s alone. That matched a shift in NASA's needs as new satellite programs ramped up. The issue was simple. NASA needed tape constantly. As LeBar put it, quote, "These satellites were suddenly using tapes 7 days a week, 24 hours a day." A shortage developed, and one practical solution was to erase old tapes and reuse them to record new satellite and telemetry data. That routine recycling fits the missing Apollo 11 reels almost too well. The raw, slow-scan signal had been stored on telemetry tapes, and those were exactly the kinds of reels that were being wiped and put back into service. LeBar eventually concluded, quote, "So I don't believe that the tapes exist today at all." Navsger pushed back on the idea that anyone acted with bad intent. Quote, "I don't think anyone in the NASA organization did anything wrong," he said. "I think it slipped through the cracks and nobody's happy about it." In other words, the erasure was likely an ordinary decision made years after the moonwalk, not a plot in 1969. Best moonwalk footage available.
We came across broadcast converted tapes during this search that were much better than we had seen. We acquired what we consider the best available broadcasts. We had tapes recorded in Sydney, Australia during the mission. Mr. LeBar and I found kinescopes at the National Archives that had not been viewed in 36 years that were made at Houston. We went to CBS Archives, and we found tapes that were fed directly from Houston to CBS, the raw data, not the ones with Walter Cronkite on it, but the raw data as recorded in archive.
Once it looked like the raw tapes were gone, the goal shifted to making the best version possible from surviving sources. The team reviewed different NTSC recordings, including material from Australia and copies in the CBS News archive that were direct feeds without commentary. They also examined kinescopes at Johnson Space Center that had not been watched in decades. These sources varied a lot. Some copies had extra noise because they had traveled through multiple analog links, while other recordings were closer to the original conversion feed and held up better. By comparing them scene by scene, the team could stitch together a stronger, best available version of the Moonwalk. To push that material further, NASA contracted Lowry Digital in Burbank, a company known for restoring classic films. Lowry described a careful approach, saying, quote, "We've got to be very, very mindful of history." The company used large-scale computing to reduce random noise and stabilize shake without turning the footage into a modern recreation. The payoff was clarity in moments that had always been muddy. Navsger described the old ladder shot as so dark you could barely tell what you were looking at, while the enhanced version made the astronauts' outline and parts of the lunar module easier to see. It's still not pristine, but it's a reminder that even when the best originals vanish, the story can still be preserved with the material that remains. Now it's time to hear from you. When you hear that NASA erased the moon landing footage, does the tape reuse explanation settle it for you, or does it make you wonder how many other historic recordings have slipped through the cracks?